Hey friends, this is Trip, and guess what? This video you're about to watch is Joerg Rieger giving his talk at Theology Beer Camp last year in Denver, Colorado. I hope you dig it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you say, whoa, this is some serious nerdy fun. It's just this very same event where they're also going to be having like beer floats, tasty craft beverages, lunch, and meeting people across the whole country, getting to interact with over 30 different theologians and a whole host of God pods. Yes, it's that event. Well, I hope you enjoy Joerg's talk and feel the lure to come join us this October the 16th to 18th, St. Paul, Minnesota. And guess what? If you can't get there in person, you can come online. And this will be streaming right there on your screen, or you can watch it after the fact. There's a host of special lectures that are available to everyone that's joining online, as well as the ability to join all the sessions that happen on the main stage. And then you'll get the recordings from the other stages as well. It's a good old time. And all you got to do is sign up. To grab that ticket in person or online is go to theologybeercamp2025.com. And I'll be looking forward to meeting a whole bunch of you internet peeps. We interact in all these different ways in the flesh and sharing a brew. See you then.
Thanks for that introduction, Trip. And it may be providential that there's a German American up here as a theologian, right? Who's also drawing from the legacies and the heritage of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. If you see me being a little clumsy tonight, it's because I shattered my left shoulder going down the Alps in Austria on a mountain bike a couple of weeks ago. And I had 2.5-hour surgery in Germany, and they put me back together again. But I'm still working things out, so go easy on my left side. Usually I invite people to go not easy on my left side, but for today, that's what we'll be doing. And so being here tonight is amazing. I mean, what a crowd. This is my third beer camp, so I feel like I'm really getting the hang of it. And having known Trip for a while and getting to know so many of you, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to keynote tonight, talking about a politics of solidarity, political theology beyond politics as usual. I think that might be an interesting conversation for us to have tonight. And since I'm so excited about beer camps, I actually brought my team. So the Wendland Cook program at Vanderbilt, which I direct, the associate director, Aaron Stauffer, is here somewhere. Aaron's all the way in the back. George Schmidt, one of my PhD students, is here. Gabby Lissi, our comms director. And then we have Lauren Heatherly, who is here from Vanderbilt's Divinity. If you're interested in the school, we do some cool stuff, I think. Check us out. This is the sort of stuff I'll be talking about. The most recent book is Theology in the Capitalozine. That's what we'll be talking about a bit tonight. And people think, well, Rieger's always talking about money, economics, and capitalism. But the point about the Capitalozine is that it is actually a good description of the time in which we live. You know, some people say we live in the Anthropocene, you know, all these theological ages. There was the Holocene and the Pleistocene and all of that. Now it's the Anthropocene, where 8 billion people of human descent are running the earth. That's not true. It's not 8 billion people deciding the fate of the earth. It's big money, it's big power, and so the age here is perhaps better described as the Capitalozine. And what's so interesting about it is that those things are actually not just shaping big money, big politics as we can see right now, but they shape us all the way to the core. And so as a theologian, keep in mind I'm a theologian, so I'm not an economist. I'm not pretending to be one on TV or anything. But I'm actually very concerned that these kinds of things shape us to the core in a way that we haven't even begun to deal with. The other book, Jesus versus Caesar, I have that up there. That's a book that was actually written under the impression of Trump's first win to the presidency came out in 2018. Some people think Caesar there has a smile of somebody we might recognize, but these are maybe just coincidences. And if you go to my personal website, my most recent blog entry is actually me talking about the political scene, which I may not be doing tonight, so you can read it up there. So tonight, political theology beyond political theology. You know, perhaps having seen some about Bonhoeffer, read some of Bonhoeffer, that ultimately there's a time when all theology has become political. We talk about Christian nationalism today a lot, which has become political, as you all know. But there was something that they realized too late in Germany, and thanks for that clip. That was really the perfect clip to get us started. While you have the guy preaching about Hitler from the pulpit, there's a lot of politics that's happening, done by people that don't even know that they're political. That's what we realized in Germany after it was all over. There were the German Christians, there were the Nazis, there were the fascists. That's a problem, obviously. But so many others, the German Methodists, my tribe, that wanted to stay out of it, said, well, we're not going to be political, we're not going to get into it. But they realized after it was all over that by not getting into it, they actually were just as political and perhaps more dangerously so, because ultimately by not getting involved, they endorsed the powers that be. So what we know at this point is that there is a problem with theology and politics. Those are important things to recognize, but I want to push this a little bit further because I want to talk about politics, religion, and the economy. If you look at academia.edu, you look for political theology, you find 25,000 followers. If you look for theology and economics, you find 136. That might tell you something. Maybe there's an issue we haven't quite dealt with yet. And so this is part of what might be helpful. So here's a hint, when we talk about political theology, beyond political theology, there's some stuff we still have to talk about. And some of that stuff we hate to talk even more about than politics and sexuality stuff you shouldn't talk about in polite company. Some of that stuff we'll get in tonight might make you cringe even a little bit more, and we'll see what happens. The other piece here is a lot of people haven't realized yet that there is conservative theology and then there's another side, but there may be some options. So people think, well, there's the conservatives and there's the liberals. This is the American culture wars that we are so familiar with. But the reality is there is also liberation traditions, and liberal and liberation, if you say it really fast. I taught in Texas for 22 years before coming to Vanderbilt. It sounds a little like liberal liberation. Sounds like it is the same thing, but it isn't. And so what we're going to push tonight a little bit more is these liberation traditions. By the way, Tripp and I will be doing a seminar on global liberation theologies. I just got done interviewing about a dozen of the world's foremost liberation theologians. We have them on tape now, and we'll do a course that's coming up soon. I'm very excited about it because these things are alive and well. People think liberation theology is something that happened in the 1970s. It's still developing, it's still building, and we'll see what happens with that. So keep in mind, it's those kinds of things that we'll be talking about. And for those of you raised in conservative traditions, I was raised in conservative German Methodism, so I can very much relate to it. Do not believe for a moment that you have to become a liberal before you become a liberationist. Bonhoeffer never became a liberal either. He sort of went from fairly traditional position to a fairly radical position very quickly. And that's part of what we're talking about also. I was a liberal maybe for about a year in seminary, until I realized maybe there's something else that's going on. And so for the past 38 years, since sort of I passed through that stage, people have off and on accused me of being a liberation theologian, and so far I have never denied it. All right, moving on. In a democracy, who wins elections? Let me go back here. One more time. Who wins elections in a democracy? the majority, right? No, this is what you're supposed to say, the majority. There are all kinds of answers, right? This is why we call it democracy, because the demos wins the elections, right? It is the people. Now, if you go back to the origins in the Greek city-states, the demos, of course, was not everybody. It was the elite citizens. So some of us like to talk about laocracy and ochlocracy because the laos is the common people and the ochlos is sort of the least of these. But democracy, at least you have this idea that the majority wins. In the US, of course, you know, in the beginning, our democracy meant that about 7% of the population, white males who also had land and money were the demos who made the decisions. Now, in the past couple of hundred years, we caught up. We expanded this, but majority wins elections. Holds that thought. Who loses elections? See if this works. There we go. Oh, yep. And if you look closely, you see the skyscrapers going up, going down, majority, minority. The minority here, if you look up sort of to the top floors, the corner offices, this is who loses elections. Of course, if you have an electoral college, it's sometimes possible that a minority can also win elections, right? That's sort of a little odd for most people around the globe. But what's at least clear, small minorities do not win elections. In the United States, who is the majority? That's another interesting question. Who is the majority in the United States? Quick answer here, working people. According to some economists, about 2/3 of Americans are working class. We always think, well, the middle class is America, and then some poor people at the bottom, some rich people at the top. But 2/3 of Americans are working class, simply defined by how much power you have at work. And a lot of people don't have a whole lot of power at work, then you're working class. Keep in mind, too, that the working class is the most diverse part of the population that has ever existed. So this is not white men in hard hats. This is a lot of people. This is a very diverse group. The 99%, if you want to expand it a little bit, are people, most of us, who have to work for a living. And if you're really honest about it, I've been in the academy now solidly having academic jobs for 30 years. Even professionals, professors, could talk about the church, could talk about other professional jobs, have less and less and less power at work. So who is the majority here? Take a hint and think about what that really means in the United States. Who's the minority by contrast, right? Well, the executive class, the ruling class, the bosses, and so on. So you wonder, how come this small minority class is still winning elections if it is only a small minority? It's like the plantation owners in the Old South winning election after election after election. How is that possible? It's like the 7% of wealthy white landowners winning election after election after election and then calling it a democracy. Back then in the day, of course, the voting system was rigged, and so most people could not vote. So guess who won, right? But what about today? How come the minority is still winning? Well, theology here. I'm a theologian, remind you, not a politician. Theology is part of the problem. The ruling class, the executive class, still shapes our images to God, of God, whether you realize it or not, shapes our images of what is most valuable. If you think about God, you know, oftentimes you look up rather than down or around. You think it's somewhere up in the corner offices that we have to pay attention. The taller the steeple of a church, the closer to God, that sort of stuff. The ruling class still defines religion without anybody knowing, noticing. If you're a pastor, you probably know what you can afford, literally, what you can afford monetary-wise to say from a pulpit and what you cannot say. And all the old classical theologians are pretty much in that same boat. When Anselm of Canterbury defines God as that than which nothing greater can be thought, well, guess what Where did this come from? Oh, right. Put this up there. Yeah, I appreciate it. When Anselm says, God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived, well, what is he talking about? You go all the way to the top and then you think God is somewhere a little bit above that, a little bit higher. And people think, well, that's the classical definition of God. That cannot be changed. Well, maybe it can and maybe it has to be changed. Even Anselm of Canterbury might have something to learn here when it comes to that. Or, even well-meaning people like so many of us talk about a higher power, right? And then, you sort of think of all the high powers, and then there's a power that's just a tad higher. If you get back to the majority for a minute, of course you can say those could also be images of God. And if you sort of did your studies, you read some of my stuff, you'll be surprised how many popular images, people's images, labor images of God are actually in our Hebrew and Christian traditions. God in the beginning of the Bible plants a garden, sort of God gets the divine hands dirty, forms Adam from clay, does the work of a potter, all that stuff. So here what we get through the majority is not just the popular democratic tradition, we're also getting images of God that might be fairly surprising. And here, talking about God, talking about Jesus Christ, this is across from Central America, talking about the various people's traditions, I think, is very exciting and something that would be really worthwhile. So there's some real material here with this minority stuff, majority-minority stuff. But think about it, how does it happen then that the majority does not define our theology, that the majority does not ultimately shape the world the way we want it to be shaped so that everybody can flourish? How do these things happen? How do then elections get decided in such a way that it's never quite clear how the powerful still maintain their power? Here's a term that I've coined tongue-in-cheek. You've all heard of divide and conquer. Here we're talking about unite and conquer. Unite and conquer is something I think a little bit more insidious because we think it's actually a good thing to unite. But think about it. Think about how unite and conquer actually works. There's a history in the U.S. that few people know about. Lerone Bennett, famous African-American historian, wrote about it in a book Before the Mayflower. Talking about white and black sharecroppers, that was right before the onset of chattel slavery, working together in the fields. And in those jobs, these people realized they had a lot in common. They realized there was something that was tying them together, black and white workers side by side, that worried the masters. And so white supremacy was something, racism, white racism, anti-black racism was something that came very convenient because it suggested to the white workers that they had more in common with the white masters than with the black slaves. And maybe they gave them a few favors, and so they felt, well, we're really so much closer to our white masters than our fellow black workers. That unite and conquer ultimately meant you unite all white people in order to conquer black people, all non-white people. But the way the masters designed it was you decide not just about the fate of non-white people, you're now also conquering most white people who don't get it. They are in this white supremacist racist trap now, thinking that what benefits the master benefits them, even though that's not really true. Conquering all non-white people actually here leads to conquering most white people as well, unless, of course, you're among the masters. This list here contains a couple of other examples of what I'm talking about. White supremacy, Christian nationalism. I mean, we saw this in Germany. You know, if you followed the Bonhoeffer trajectory, what did German fascism do? It did not ultimately help my ancestors. In fact, some of them died in the wars. Some of them came home wounded. One of my grandfathers lost a leg, in a way, this nationalism is this false unite and conquer. It's a false sort of solidarity that suggests to you this is good for you, while it really is good only for the very top. Ethnocentrism, you could go down that list. Sexism suggests to men, we have something over women if we stick together. We have this male privilege, while in reality, of course, it only helps the men at the very top, and it hurts everybody else. The last one here, that might be a little bit triggering. The heterosexual family also functions in terms of a lot of unite and conquer, because your mommy telling you, or your grandma, or your dad, or all of that, where ultimately you feel like you have this responsibility, this liability to your family. You have to be together. You have to, create family peace and love and all of that. Jesus had it figured out. If you read the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, there's this famous story when his mother and his brothers and sisters come, and Jesus says, who are they? Who is my family? Who is my mother and my brother and my sisters? And you think, well, that's sort of a Jesus thing, but maybe this is a way of overcoming some of this family bondedness that actually does not lead us forward, and that is another example of the unite and conquer. And so, of course, once you realize that, maybe you fight these things a little bit differently. That's where we're headed here. How do you address it? Well, of course, you could get really angry, you could get pissed about it, or maybe do something else, develop solidarity. I'm really happy that solidarity was part of that Bonhoeffer quotation that Tripp read earlier. But here, this is a book by Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor that I highly recommend, African American Studies professor at Princeton, from hashtag Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation. From that book, in one of the chapters, he talks about the potential for solidarity that has to do with the fact that when one group of workers suffer oppression, it negatively affects all workers. This, she says, is the material foundation for the solidarity and unity within the working class. There is a foundation here. So solidarity is not the false solidarity of unite and conquer. Solidarity is also not the moralizing that you oftentimes get in church. You must be in solidarity. You ought to be there. It's simply the recognition that we're in this together. We're the people who are not benefiting from this. We're the 99% that have to work for a living. And you could say, well, this is now an African American Studies professor. Well, that's her opinion. But she's actually in agreement with the Apostle Paul, who in this image of the body of Christ in 1 Corinthians 12 says, if one member suffers, all suffer together with it. Or as Dr. King said at one point, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's that material foundation. So solidarity here is just open your eyes, recognize how we're all in this together. So solidarity in this case is not based on right-wing identity or any other identity, nationality, family, not even religion, and we'll get back to religion in just a moment. It is something that goes deeper and that ultimately creates different kinds of relationships. Therefore, of course, it can deal with diversity. So solidarity doesn't mean marching in lockstep, everybody talking alike, looking alike. It means, in fact, that the working majority, who we're talking about here, the 99%, can be the most diverse group on the face of the earth and yet do something together, which is what the dominant system is most afraid of. This is when they get nervous. When a Bonhoeffer gets upset, Bonhoeffer forgot to organize. That's a bit of a mistake that we cannot afford right now. When a Bonhoeffer gets upset and protests and speaks truth to power and dem Rad in die Speichen fallen, to grab the wheels, the spokes of the wheel and all of that, that's great. And we celebrate him now, all these years later, also got killed in a concentration camp for that. What we're talking about is something more dangerous. We're talking about how do we actually come together. What we're talking about here too is something that's much more interesting, powerful, and radical than talking about inclusivity and solidarity. We're talking about something that's much more than just fairness and being egalitarian-minded. We're actually talking about taking sides. We're talking about changing the church and changing the world from the bottom up rather than including more people in the dominant status quo. So once you sort of go through this with our theological traditions, you'll see there is some stuff here that's really pretty amazing. So you have 1 Corinthians 12:26. I just quoted to you, if one member suffers, all suffer together with it. You have this unforgiving servant story, and we don't have a lot of time to go into this, but this is one of the most fascinating parables for me that Jesus is telling, because what you're getting here is, you know the story, right? There's this boss, this king that forgives a service worker, a huge amount of debt. The guy goes out and refuses to forgive his fellow worker an equal amount of debt. And then, of course, the moral of the story is always, well, God forgave you, you should also forgive. Every sermon I've ever heard on this is moralizing. You should forgive because you have been forgiven. If you read this from below, from the working majority, from the 99%, you could say, maybe if you're really smart about this, there's a different solution. Because if you think about it, this worker whose debt has been forgiven now has some options. You can either collect some cash, you have some cash in your pocket, which is nice, or you could do something else, you could forgive. And what happens when you forgive, right? Well, you start organizing, you create a relationship, you have a friend. You now have somebody who might stick up for you if the boss, which is most likely, ever decides to write on debt again. This worker now stands with you, and this worker forgiving somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. You now have solidarity, you might have a union. I know not everybody is excited about these things, but this is how you change the world. By the way, if you appreciate having Sundays off work, 8-hour work days, 40-hour work weeks, women's rights at work, end of child labor, social security list and all of that, none of this was ever given from the top of the corner offices. This was fought for on the ground. Thank a worker, thank a union for that. And you can say, well, that's Rieger talking, but I think this is getting back to our theological traditions in a way that is very striking and very interesting. I'll add one more quick thing. This is something that we do at the Wendland Cook program at Vanderbilt that I run. And we're some theologians, some ethicists, some people love to talk about politics, some people talk about economics, and everything in between. We also talk about God a lot, so don't forget, it's really about God. Privilege and power here is something that also has to be distinguished if you really want to build solidarity. Take white supremacy again as an example. Once you distinguish privilege and power, you can realize that a lot of white people, I'm a white person, you're American, right? I have white privilege. There's no question about it. I too have a fairly prominent university job, one of the highest ranking jobs in my university. That's really nice. It means I have even more privilege. But if I really think about it, I have an odd and limited amount of power. Because if I stand here on a bully pulpit and say, things have to change, and I really hate this and I want to change that, nothing actually changes. It took me a while to figure that out, but here I am tonight, and I think I've learned my lesson. So you cannot do these things by simply assuming that your privilege translates into power. This is one of the big mistakes. Privileged people think, well, we just stand up, white people speaking out against racism, and it will change. It doesn't change. You're disappointed. And those people you're trying to help are even more disappointed. So it's all disappointment. Once you realize that privilege and power may be related but not identical, you then start realizing maybe we have to organize in order to build power. Another lesson I wish Bonhoeffer had learned a little bit sooner before they killed him, but it's not too late for us to learn it, right? This is why I'm a little bit passionate about these things, as you can see. And of course, now you think about how all of this functions once you distinguish privilege and power in this capitalist scene, how God's power works. Oftentimes this top-down power, we're sort of sick and tired of it. We look for different different models. There are different theological models, there are philosophical models that are really cool. But based on these democratic traditions that are so dear to us, especially as Americans, and they should be, why don't we start thinking about God in terms of democratic bottom-up traditions, even in terms of divine power? This is why the kid was born in a stable, and why the heavenly choir of angels was sent to shepherds rather than to Jerusalem or to Rome, where it would have made a much bigger impression, or to Vanderbilt University, but didn't show up there. So think about it this way. There's some real work that still needs to be done. I'm getting close to the end here, but I want to talk about this dirty term that for most people is even more difficult to even put in your mouth than talk about sexuality and politics. You're not supposed to talk about that in polite company. Remember, Thanksgiving is coming up. But class is even more difficult, especially in America. Here are a couple of models of class terminology that might not be that helpful. This is what they teach you in college, by the way, and in most seminaries too, right? Classism. Oh, we have class stereotypes and we should overcome them. So I went to this church in Nashville downtown. They said, we've overcome class stereotypes. We have millionaires and homeless people sitting next to each other in the pews. We're so inclusive. Well, maybe the class problem is not let's be more inclusive, but let's overcome these tremendous inequalities that destroy so many lives. Take stratification. Most people think class is about layers, and then some sociologists have 15 layers. You talk about middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class, middle class, blah, blah, blah. The problem there is these things are all separate. They're just independent entities that you can go in, and then somebody holds a microphone under your nose and asks you some questions. That's not class the way it actually makes a lot of sense. Poverty, wealth, we talk about poor, we talk about rich, we talk about greed. What might be more helpful is to think about class in terms of relationships. Not the layers, but how the various layers are connected. That's the question. Where do you play a role here? We're talking about exploitative relationships, so not just, how do we relate, but how does power flow? This is the God question again. How does power flow with God? I wish some of my process colleagues were talking a little bit more about power once in a while, and I know they do. I hang with them, I love them, I talk process myself. I first read Whitehead. Actually, John Cobb in German translation, so I go way back. But can we talk about these power differentials a bit more? The location of intersectionality, Yamanka Taylor again, material basis of solidarity, and so on. I'll move a little faster here because I want to talk about this deep solidarity thing here, which is where it's really heading here. By the way, maybe back here, just one more time. What's not on here is class struggle. Oh my God, class struggle. When you say class struggle, get my 5-minute signal. When you say class struggle, you must be a Marxist because Karl Marx talked about class struggle, right? Didn't he talk about? Remember that from college? The person who talked about class struggle first was Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, who says, in this system, you have the bosses and you have the workers, and the bosses usually win. Adam Smith figured that out decades before Marx figured it out. But you don't have to read Adam Smith or talk to Karl Marx. Talk to the person down in the grocery store stocking shelves. If they know something about class struggle, say, well, never heard that word, but what's your relationship to the job? What's your relationship to the boss? And they say, well, sometimes I get pushed around a bit. Sometimes they're not listening to me. Well, mostly they're not listening to me. And of course, depending on what job he has. You'd be surprised how little they listen to us in the universities either. That's a bit of a rude awakening. So if you're a student working on your PhD, be prepared. So this contentious relationship here is something to be kept in mind. And of course, we could complain about it, but this is where we're going. We're not complaining. We're addressing it by realizing that this may well be what welds us all together. Like the unions say, the boss is our best organizer. Because once you realize that there are these structures. It's not mean people. We're not demonizing any individuals, rich people or so on. We're talking about structures where everybody plays their role and you're not getting anywhere. Maybe this is what welds us together. Or as Paul says, if one member suffers, all suffer together with it. I could quote more Paul here, or some Jesus, or some Moses for that matter, but we don't have time tonight. Deep solidarity here, and you see it in the image, is not based on sameness. It's not about everybody is exactly alike, but it's actually based on working together for the flourishing of life. And in this case, our difference actually doesn't make us weaker. It's not something that you just have to tolerate. Our difference makes us stronger. This is the paradox, but this is the exciting thing. Our difference is what actually helps us move forward together. And that's what the dominant system is most afraid of. This is why all the unite and the divide and conquer strategies. So think about it. There's intersexual solidarity, intergender solidarity, interreligious solidarity. Now it's not, oh, let's have a nice conversation with other religions, but no. What if we put our forces together? What if we combined our resources and built some real power and organized? You go down that list. International solidarity is the same thing, because this is why they tried to play off my German ancestors against your American ancestors, because they thought we can fool them and we get them into all these conflictual relationships so that guess who wins? Not them. Quick comment on party politics. I will skip final slide here, solidarity circles. But just ask your question is about the parties. Who is getting the class thing? Some of them are hell-bent to make sure that you ignore it or misdefine it or don't get it. Some are waking up to a bit, but there's still a lot of work to do on every side. So this is not a partisan conversation. This is just saying we really have to hold each other's feet to the fire to even see that. Now you see why we're going beyond political theology, because this is not about party politics. This is about how we live together, how we build power, and how we actually change things. This is what we're doing here at the Wendell & Cook program. One of our projects is solidarity circles, and what we've done is we put faith communities and examples of the solidarity economy together, because we realize the way you liberate yourself is not by talking yourself out of an enclosed box or writing yourself out of an enclosed book, out of an enclosed box. 27 books later, 200 articles later, I realized that doesn't work. But you actually have to do it by building relationships. The reason we put solidarity economy and church together is because none of it can do it alone. The church actually needs some work. Economy needs some work. The theological point here is the church cannot be built from within. If anything you remember from my talk tonight, the church cannot be built from within. It's simply realizing, why is that? Well, because you cannot confine God to the church. God, in a way, has to be seen in this broader context. That's what the solidarity circles are doing. It's a bit of a cliffhanger because we have two workshops. There's one tomorrow, one on Saturday on solidarity circles. If you want to figure out how that works, how that might actually work for your churches. We've ran about 200 churches through that right now. And I'm really encouraged because what I see coming here, this is the final comment, is maybe we need to start talking about a great awakening. Great awakenings, and of course this is part of that tradition, but maybe we need to be awakened and more awoke in this much broader sense. The race question is part of it, the gender question is part of it, the nationality, ethno question is part of it. All the other kinds of questions that we usually think are touchy issues but somehow disconnected are all part of it. And what we're realizing, the new Reformation will not come from some great theologian on a stage telling you what to do on a Thursday night. It will actually come from organizing, by putting people together and by really putting our faith communities in contexts where they can make a difference. So thank you so much. I really look forward to all the conversations that we're going to have, and check us out, check out the Solidarity Circles, talk to us. We'll see.